This landscape material demonstration starts with the third-person template, and we have our starter content because we're going to use a couple of the textures from the starter content in the demonstration. So we'll quickly sculpt the landscape just so we have something to apply our material to. And we saw this in a previous discussion. So we'll go into landscape mode and just generate a default material. I am going to set this at 0.1, just a little bit above the existing floor. Should give us enough difference to stop the Z fighting. And we now have our landscape here, and we'll just sculpt. So if we play the game here, we can see we now have a bit of landscape sculpted on here. Escape to go back out, back to selection mode. We'll do a save all here. So what we're going to create is a HeightMapBlended material. So this is not a material that uses the terrain's height, but it actually uses the material height maps. Remember in our PBRs, we had the color map, the normal map, and a height map, and that all helped make the material look more realistic. But what we're going to create here is a material that we can paint on our landscape, and we'll be able to select whether we want to paint grass or rock. And we're going to do a simple two material demonstration. The image in our notes, I think, shows you 2 or 3, where it does rock, gravel, and rock, gravel, and grass. We'll just do rock and grass as an example. You can extrapolate that to go further. In the image in our notes, we also replicate the blending for the normal map. So we're just going to do in this demonstration the map or the process for the color map, and you can see how the two materials will actually blend from the rock material to the grass material on a blended approach using the height of the different materials to overlap them so there's not a hard solid line. And what we're looking for is something like this. So let me bring this into view here, and you can see this particular layer, there's not a hard line. It's defined just based on how I made this particular image, but we'll talk about how you can change that. But you can see the cracks from the rocks extend into the grass, and the grass extends into the rock. So we're going to create this kind of HeightMapBlended material. So this isn't the one that uses your terrain. It uses the material's height map to create a new material. There's a couple of different steps involved in this process. So we've created the terrain, and now we're going to come in and create our material. So I'm going to create a folder for our material. And in here, HeightMapBlended. It could just go in this level if we wanted. I'm going to create a new material, and we'll call it M underscore grass rock height map blend. Opens in the other window. We'll drag it into view here. So the main component for this particular material is a landscape blend node. So we're just going to look up landscape. And we want the landscape layer blend node. So this particular node comes up with 0 elements in the array, and we're going to add 2 elements to the array because we want to blend between rock and grass. So I'm just going to click the plus sign twice, and you can see we now have 2 elements in our material array here, and each of these has an option to expand and put more information in. So I'm going to name the first layer grass, and I'm going to name the second layer rock, We're going to change the blending mode here to height. So this is the part that gives us that nice overlap between the two surfaces. And you'll see as I added this or changed this to the height map blend, I had some additional inputs here. So in order to use this material setup, we need to have the color map and we need to have a height map. So let's go find in our starter content those two maps for our grass material. So I'm going to bring up the content browser. We're going to go to starter content. Now you could use any PBR texture materials that you wanted if you had them loaded. I'm using the starter content just because it's here and it's easy to access. So I'm going to search for grass, and we're going to notice that we have two options for grass. We have grass as a diffuse or albedo or color map, so we're going to use that one. And then we're going to look and find that there is no grass height map. We have to have a height map. So lacking a height map but still wanting to use the starter content, I'm going to show you a little trick that is questionable but doable. I'm going to take the normal map, and if we look at this output from our color or diffuse texture and connect it to the base color, you can see we've got that grass picture. If we connect the base color from the normal map, you'll see we have that greeny blue color that we associate with normal maps. Height maps, like the roughness map and metallic maps, are grayscale images. So if we drag out from here and do a desaturate, which takes the color out, and we plug this in, this gives us something that looks like a height map. This isn't a proper height map, but it's going to work well enough for our demonstrations here. So I'm calling this a fake height map. Normally you would have a single image and you would a grayscale image and you would just use that. So in order to use these, break this for now, I use this connection just to demonstrate what it was going to look like. We're going to grass layer textures. And we're going to take the output of this and put it into our layer grass, and we need a height map for that, so we're going to put it into layer height for the grass. These need to connect to our material. Now we need to do the same thing for our rocks. So we're going to go back into the content browser. We'll search for rock. I think in the demonstration image, I used this basalt texture and the basalt normal map, because again, we do not have a height map for them, and we're going to do this sort of fake height map. Using the desaturation. Desaturation just takes the color out. So here we have fake height map. Without the height map, this blend node does not work. So this is the rock texture. So in this material, we're going to be able to paint between grass and rock on our landscape. So I haven't saved it yet. I will save it. And this is the high-level setup for our materials. You will notice that the material is not updating here. If I wanted to see something other than the gray sphere, I could go into this preview weight, set this to 0.5, this to 0.5, and you're just going to see a material that has half the weight set to one, half the weight set to the other. So it's nice to see it other than seeing the gray sphere, but it's not real meaningful to us. So let's apply it to the landscape material, and then we'll go from there. So I'm going to do an apply and save. So let's actually set our landscape up to use that. I'm just going to check our OBS recording. It still says recording good. Okay. Going up to our landscape, I'm making sure that the landscape, the whole material is selected and not one of the tiles. I think when we came back here, I had this tile, and you can see the one tile selected. So I just want to make sure I've got the whole landscape selected. And with the whole landscape selected, we can scroll down in details, and we can set the material to our newly created m_grass. We can search through here and find this one. And when we hit it, it's going to turn it to this lovely black shade. So we still have a little bit of setup to do in landscape mode. So we're going to go back into landscape mode. We want to be in the paint tab here. So in paint tab, so I've got paint tab selected, and we actually need to start creating this. So if we hover over here, it says create layers from the assigned material. So I assigned our m_grass rock HeightMapBlend material. This button is going to look at that material, find out how many layers are there. You know, if we had 5 different layers, but we only have 2 right now. So it's going to create 2 layers for us. And here's the grass and rock layers that it created. Now, very important, notice that each of these materials has a little plus sign. And if you look carefully at that plus sign, there's a little asterisk underneath that. We need to create a layer information node in order for this to work. So I'm going to click on the plus sign, and it's simply click on the plus sign, pick it as a weight blended layer. I'm going to save it in our materials folder here in where we created our main material. And we're going to go back to our landscape mode. It dumped us out. And we're going to do the same for the rock material, weight blended. Make sure it's in the materials. And you notice here that in this content materials, HeightMapBlended grass was our original material that we created, and there's these 2 other information nodes that we just created. These are all required for this process to work. So now back in our landscape, we are still in paint mode. I'm going to highlight this one, and I can say right click and say fill layer, and it looks like grass. And if I right click on this one and say fill layer with that material, it has our rock material. I'm going to come back and fill the grass because we use grass as our base material. I'm going to click on rock. And now with our paintbrush, just like when we were painting the landscape texture or terrain, we can actually paint this material. And I'm going to turn the brush size down, and I have a brush tool strength. I'm going to turn it up. Maybe I'm going to go 0.7. And if I just click and start painting, you'll see I have this material on here now. And I'm going to go look at the material in game. And you can see I've got a somewhat hard line, not crisp and clean. I want to have a bit of a blended line, which is nice. And if we zoom in on this, you can see I do have a blend between the grass and the rock. So that's the effect we're after. Now we can start adjusting our brush. For example, with the brush here, I've just used the base brush. I can use a mask on it, and if I say just hit the mask button, you can see it gives me this funky pattern based on here. But if I scroll down or searching here, I could use a noise pattern, and there's a built-in Perlin noise, and now our mask has a little more funky shape, but it's still square. I'll use the round brush shape with the purlin noise, and now I'm starting to get a little more variation to it. I can turn down the brush strength, and when I paint, you can see I'm getting softer edges. And if we go look at these edges, we're starting to get a bit better material. And you can see it's a nice blended. It uses the height map of the materials to blend the two materials together, so you can see the rock petering out and the grass coming in, making a nicer looking material. So by adjusting the brush types here, the strengths of the materials, we can start painting on this. And of course, if we wanted to paint snow and gravel and grass and whatnot, we could have more materials layers in here for our different choices of painting materials, and then we can paint up our landscape in this process. Now, one thing that can help the material look better is you'll notice that we're just driving the color node on the material. Remember I said in PBR materials there's often only two options or two items, textures associated with it, a color texture and a normal map, which happens to be the two we have. So if we wanted to do a normal map to help improve the appearance of this, we could just take this whole section. I'm going to Control C it. I'm going to Control V. And we're going to move and make a couple of modifications here. So for each of these, now I want to blend the normal map, and I'm going to connect this into our node's normal connection. So if we zoom in here, it's connected in normal, and it's not looking right because we still have to fix up this. Right now I'm blending the color texture, so I'm going to delete the color texture. I'm going to highlight the normal map for this one. I'm going to paste it in. And we're going to take the normal map color and blend it with the fake normal map texture. And then down here, we're going to do the same. Delete the color texture, highlight the normal, copy it, paste it in, because here we're connecting the output of this blend. Now you can see we've got the better normals for the rocks in here, and I'm going to apply this. And now when we look at our materials in game, we should have a better visual on it, and somewhere where we have an angled view might give us a bit better. So you can see here, if we get the light on it just right, we can start to see a little bit better texture, and you can see the veins of the rock and the grass overlapping in a more pleasing effect, and it's less shiny. And of course, as we paint, it's not painting over top of the objects, it's only painting the ground, the landscape material. So we still have our original items here. So this is a HeightMapBlended material. In one of the other videos, we'll talk about a terrain height variable material where it sets a different material based on the actual height of the terrain. This one uses the height map of the material to overlap the two materials in a nice blended almost seamless approach, so that they blend together and they don't have a hard line where the two materials map. So we're going to save this material, and this is our example with the HeightMapBlended material to create these nice easy blends between the two materials, and it lets us paint on the different materials. And if we wanted to paint with more material, different materials, we would simply add another section here in each of these blend nodes, if we wanted to add a snow level, for example, we would come into layers and we would add this new layer, and then we would just replicate each of these for that new layer that plugged in here. So height map blended materials.